The quiet north. June 1940. A cold wind cuts through steel as if through fabric, and the entire Norwegian fjord seems to breathe a heavy fog. Amid this grey, empty sea, a huge dark shadow moves. It is His Majesty's aircraft carrier, HMS Glorious. A ship that has seen more storms than many men have ever seen land. She moves slowly, as if tired. The deck bears the traces of a long campaign, oil stains, tied ropes, aircraft with drooping wings. The crew knows, the mission is over. The operation in Norway has failed, and now their task is simply to leave. To return home. A strange silence hung over the sea since morning. No radio traffic, no Allied signals. Some sailors said it was a premonition. Others, that it was simply fatigue. On the bridge, there's a tension that doesn't show on their faces. The officers scan the horizon, as if trying to discern something in the fog that shouldn't be there. But the instruments are silent. The radio is silent. It's as if the entire ocean has become empty. Too empty. Below, by the hangar, mechanics are slowly checking the aircraft. They do their work almost mechanically, though deep down, they know, a scrambled takeoff is unlikely to become routine procedure here. But it's still better than waiting. Waiting for the unknown. An officer passes above the deck. He gazes for a moment at the endless grey horizon. He knows, the German ships are still somewhere in these waters. They left the fjords of Norway only recently. And if a collision occurs, the aircraft carrier has no escort, no reconnaissance, and almost no time to react. But no one says this out loud. Some of the crew tell each other stories, about homes, about families, about what the first day back will be like. They laugh quietly, but nervously. Each of them senses that this path is familiar to too many ships that never made it to port. The sun rises slightly above the sea. The Glorious's large steel deck takes on the appearance of an icy desert. And the ship continues to move forward, straight into the fog, where anything could be hidden. This silence is deceptive. This emptiness is dangerous. And although no one on the ship knows it yet, in just a few hours this steel machine will find itself face to face with an enemy who makes no mistakes, and who never forgives. The night over the Norwegian sea was heavy and viscous, like thick smoke. Fog clung to the waves, concealing the ships as securely as the walls of a fortress. HMS Glorious departed the coast of Norway, tired and dazed after weeks of continuous sorties. Damaged aircraft still sat on its decks. The mechanics hadn't slept for days. The men were as exhausted as the war machine itself. But despite the fatigue, the ship sailed without its usual air patrol. Without reconnaissance aircraft. Without eyes that could spot a threat before it saw them. Radio silence also played a role. Neither the ship nor its captain exchanged signals with other British vessels. Glorious sailed practically blind. The bridge was silent, deaf, heavy, uneasy. Only the sound of the turbines and the rustle of the wind. Occasionally, a dull rumble could be heard in the distance. It could be the sea, it could be something else. No one knew for sure. And beyond the horizon, hidden in the same grey haze, loomed two German battlecruisers, Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. These monsters have become much faster and better armed than an aircraft carrier. They were returning from a combat mission, confident that the British would not be in these latitudes. And yet, the two forces, each confident in their own invisibility, inexorably drew closer. Where the fog was especially thick, where the grey sky merged with the grey water, disaster was quietly brewing. On the Glorious, no one even suspected that several dozen kilometers ahead, guns capable of piercing its deck were moving. And the men, ordinary sailors, mechanics, pilots, thought of home, of fatigue, of the end of this long operation. No one was thinking about battle. No one was expecting an enemy. But the sea is a cruel teacher. And it loves to throw lessons at you when you're least prepared. Soon, the gray spot in the fog will begin to grow. Soon, someone on watch will shout, "Ship abreast." And Glorious will understand. He met more than just an enemy. He met death, coming at him at 30 knots. The silhouette emerging from the fog grew with alarming speed. First, it was a dark dot. Then, a shadow. And a few moments later, the silhouette of the main battery turrets. Chaos reigned on the bridge of the Glorious. Orders, shouts, the alarm bell. Men dropped everything and ran to their posts, many half asleep, without helmets, without gloves. No one expected a fight. Especially not against a battlecruiser. While the British officers peered through binoculars, trying to figure out what kind of ship it was. The Germans already knew. On the Scharnhorst, they reported, "I see an aircraft carrier." And the steel giants turned, choosing the perfect position for a salvo. Glorious was still trying to turn into the wind to get the fighters up. But it was too late. Too late. At 16:32, the German main battery turrets rose like the head of a predator. The first guns were aimed. The fog parted. And the German fleet opened fire. The roar was as loud as the sea had exploded. The salvo shook the ocean. The 30-kilometer-long shots turned the air into a firestorm, pillars of smoke, flashes, impacts, echoes that rolled over the water. The first shell landed close, raising a gigantic column of water. The second, even closer. The third struck the deck of the Glorious. The metal bent. Shrapnel flew like a swarm of knives. The men were thrown back by the explosion. Fires broke out instantly, fuel and wooden elements on the deck turned into torches. Every second counted. No one on the British ship even had time to launch aircraft. The crew tried to bring the artillery to bear, but the Glorious main guns were too weak against two battlecruisers. The anti-aircraft guns thundered, but it was mere sparks against the hammer. Scharnhorst continued firing methodically. Hit after hit. Each salvo, another wound. Another fire. Another fatality. On the bridge of the Glorious, the officers tried to transmit a radio message, but the antennas were damaged by the first strikes. There was no communication. No help. The fog no longer concealed them, in fact, it became a trap. No reconnaissance. No support. No chance. The battle lasted only a few minutes. But for the men on deck, those minutes dragged on like an eternity. Each blow seemed final. But the ship still held. It burned, but it lived. Split, but it continued to move forward. And in that firestorm, he looked not like a victim, but like a warrior who refused to go down without a fight. The worst was yet to come. But it was in those moments that the legend was born of how an aircraft carrier met two steel monsters, and did not retreat. The flames on Glorious grew with each passing minute. It seemed as if the entire ship was engulfed in a living flame. It crawled across the deck, devouring everything in its path. But the aircraft carrier still lived. It stubbornly held on, as if the metal itself refused to die. And then they entered the fray. Two small British destroyers, Acasta and Ardent. Ships 10 times smaller than the German cruisers. With guns whose range was a laughable figure compared to the Scharnhorst. With crews who understood. There would be no return from this battle. But they advanced, straight toward the German giants. To buy time for Glorious. To give at least one chance to survive. Ardent was the first to enter the firing zone. Its guns fired rapidly, desperately, as if trying to drown out the roar of the German salvos. He launched his torpedoes, but the range was too great. Scharnhorst's return salvo turned the destroyer into a pillar of fire. A few minutes later, Ardent disappeared beneath the water. Acasta was left alone. But it didn't turn back. At full speed, it charged toward the German cruisers, firing from all barrels. Roar, flames, explosions, the sea boiled around the small ship. And then, a miracle. One of Acasta's torpedoes found its target. A dull thud. An explosion. The torpedo hit Scharnhorst. The cruiser shook. Smoke billowed. The destroyer had accomplished what seemed impossible. It had wounded the Iron Beast. But Acasta paid with its life. It was hit by a full salvo from both cruisers. Masts collapsed. Fire engulfed the entire hull. A few minutes later, it split in half and disappeared into the frigid water. And now Glorious was alone. The ship was doomed. Fires destroyed the hangars. The guns fell silent. Water gushed in. The bridge was already drowning in flames and smoke. The last salvo from the German cruisers reduced the aircraft carrier to a burning hulk. It listed. People jumped overboard, clinging to the bridge, to anything that could keep them afloat. A few minutes later, HMS Glorious disappeared beneath the water, quietly, without a last flash, as if plunging into eternity. Hundreds of sailors remained in the icy water. Not a single British ship was nearby. The Germans did not stop to rescue the men, fearing submarines. Silence reigned over the ocean again. Survivors were found only 3 days later. Of more than 1,500 men, only 40 survived. Today, this battle is rarely remembered. But history remembers it as a tragedy, where the heroism of small ships prevented the ships from going down without a fight. As an example of how courage can sometimes be stronger than steel. And that at the edge of the world, in the cold Norwegian fog, men fought so desperately, as if every shot could change the course of the war.